Thanks, Jordana. Dawda Jobarteh, SDG Strategy Hub at the United Nations. And as Jordana mentioned, being joined by colleagues and friends, Chrysula and Angus from Global Compact and UN Foundation. I want to be really, really tight and really, really quick. I work in the UN Office for Partnerships, which strives to serve as a gateway for partnerships, building between private sector foundations and non-state actors in the United Nations system to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. I lead the Sustainable Development Group Strategy Hub. It's chaired by the Deputy Secretary General, and the core members are very, very intentionally half United Nations entities and half external partners. Our mission and our goal is around shaping the SDG implementation narrative and action initiatives, facilitating strategic advocacy, leveraging key moments and opportunities, incubating and propelling novel actions, and working with the creation of advocacy and communications tools, as well as strategically utilizing UN assets, including SDG advocates. We went on a couple of weeks ago to launch what we called an open brief, and the open brief was for creatives. We've launched it and had a huge, overwhelming response, where we've had over 17,000 submissions from 143 countries. What we had actually asked people to do within the creative community is lend their genius, their creativity, and their ingenuity to amplifying WHO messaging, and messaging to basically help keep people safe and flatten the curve. There was a huge amount of response, and the response has just been absolutely overwhelmingly positive. The idea is really people came together to show what they're able to do, how they're able to help transmit the messaging around COVID, around what they can do to keep people safe. What we've actually learned in a really short amount of time is in this crazy digital world in the 21st century, the things that are actually keeping people safe are very, very analog. It's physical distancing, it's washing your hands, it's listening to authoritative messaging in terms of what it is that you're able to do. I want to give a message very, very clearly in terms of what those online can do. What we're asking is to get this messaging out to everyone everywhere. We're hoping that the people, the brands, the fashion industry, with all of the imagination, ingenuity, and craft of shaping people's mindsets, shaping people, what they wear, what they think about, the colors that they see. We're really asking that people come together to reciprocate the creative content development in terms of getting the messaging out to everyone everywhere. We're asking that if you're able to, donate ad and media space to get COVID messaging out to everyone, to flatten the curve. If you need content, we now have a catalog and a library of 17,000 amazing pieces of art that are in open source, can be translated into multiple languages. I'm actually going to show the platform on my screen if I can figure out how to do that, and I have. As well as, if you are creating content out there, we ask that you use this amazing logo that has been developed as part of the open brief, as well as the 6 stamps here dealing with personal hygiene, physical distancing, knowing your symptoms, myth busting, spreading kindness, and solidarity. There's so much work that needs to be done. There's so much work when we're all under lockdown and starting to think about how to restart, reboot, and reset our businesses and come together. It's very, very clear that the world that existed a month ago isn't the world that we should have in the future. It hasn't shown enough resilience. It hasn't shown, it's left too many people behind. There's too much inequality, too much inequity. And what we have to build into the future and build back better and stronger will need to be reflective of greater equity. And the Sustainable Development Goals are really the roadmap to get there. So I'm going to stop here. I'd like to invite my friend and colleague, Chrysula Winegar from the UN Foundation. I would love you to touch on, what the UN Foundation has done in its response to COVID-19 and the coronavirus. What can brands, designers, and the industry actors do to help the response to COVID-19 and the recovery? And just give us some examples if you can. Over to you, Chrysula.
Fantastic. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, my friends. It's such a pleasure to be here and to represent my organization, the United Nations Foundation. And Nadia, it was great to hear from you. You've been such an incredible supporter of the SDGs throughout. Thank you so much for all that your organization does to support the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm wearing my favorite everyday Swarovski hoops that never take them off. So the UN Foundation, our job, we sit to the side of the UN. We're not the UN, but we consider ourselves the UN's best friend. We're a private foundation that exists to serve the purposes of elevating the work of the UN in a multiplicity of ways. And one of the really unique opportunities that we had with the declaration of this COVID-19 pandemic was to leverage all of our resources and skills and our staff who have worked incredible hours over the last few weeks to help the World Health Organization set up the COVID-19 Solidarity Response Fund. And that fund, you can learn more about it after today at COVID-19, that's 19responsefund.org, and I'll say that a few times. But the fund exists to help anyone who is a non-government, so a non-member state of the UN, who wants to directly support the work of the World Health Organization at this really critical time, can do so through the Solidarity Response Fund. And, this is a time where we need the World Health Organization more than ever, as it exists to lead and coordinate global health challenges. That's its job, and that's what it's doing every day, every hour right now. The donations to the fund will actually support quite immediately, because we're able to move very, very quickly to get funds in and then back out the door to where they need to go through WHO's distribution, to track and understand the spread of the virus, to ensure that patients get the care they need, and that frontline workers, doctors, nurses, other frontline health workers get essential supplies and information, and then really accelerate efforts to develop vaccines, tests, and treatments. So, for example, particularly some of the fund WHO has redirected to UNICEF so that they can really tackle children's and families issues, and that they're equipped with what they need. The latest WHO guidance, for example, information to help protect them, supporting in vulnerable countries around access to water, sanitation, and hygiene. The wash your hands message is an entirely different proposition in certain economies. Donations are also, a tranche has been released this week to CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, and that's to finance research and development on vaccines, because we know that vaccines are going to be a critical next step in this. So my fashion industry friends, how can you help? Well, first of all, you already are. That's what's so exciting. We've had just, either direct donations or proceeds of sale type of situation. And there are also additional ways that the industry is being really innovative. So many organizations, companies, for example, have, you guys are amazing at supply chain. If anyone else understands supply chain, it's the fashion sector. And so organizations have been connecting hospital networks, medical systems to their supply chain expertise and helping them get PPE vendors connected to the right hospital systems. They've been also, of course, repurposing manufacturing space directly to tackle machine washable masks and isolation gowns and other forms of PPE. Some companies are also thinking about lending or small grants to staff who get sick so that their workforce feels safe and protected, that they've got a cushion underneath them. And then, of course, in certain circumstances, product donations. So there's really a plethora of ways that the fashion industry writ large is stepping up. I want to just, I'm overwhelmed by the individual response to this COVID-19 Solidarity Response Fund. And again, you can find that at covid19responsefund.org. We have had nearly 250,000 individuals, in addition to all of the incredible big corporate partners who have come in and made those sort of significant multi-million-dollar donations and so on. We've also had gamers and streamers of every flavor come in and contribute. people have donated from $1 to $5 to several $1,000s to do whatever they can. So if you personally have an ability to give right now, I would urge you to contribute. And if your organization has an ability to give, please reach out to us through the fund.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much, Chrysula. It's absolutely amazing in such a short amount of time being able to mobilize so much money based on solidarity and people coming together. Angus, can you walk us through very, very quickly, how Global Compact has engaged the private sector to strengthen the response for the pandemic, and talk about how specific actions that fashion industry can help tackle the global pandemic as well. Over to you.
Thanks, Dawda. Such a pleasure to be part of this conversation. I love the theme of kindness and solidarity because truly now more than ever, those are the tools that will help us win this battle. The Secretary General has said that we're in a war against the coronavirus, but it is truly kindness and solidarity that will get us through. So the United Nations Global Compact is the UN's business initiative. We're on our 20th anniversary year, and our mission, very simply, is to unite business for a better world. We work with companies around the world to help them transform their businesses to advance the Sustainable Development Goals and the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact, covering human rights, labor, the environment, and anti-corruption. And we feel that now more than ever, those principles and those values embedded in the SDGs are a helpful guide to decision makers in the business community as they navigate these uncharted waters. And some of the ways that we are working with the private sector right now to meet the unprecedented challenges the business community is facing include a variety of support to help think through how the SDGs and the 10 principles can guide them right now. Because as you alluded to, Dawda, if we had been further advanced on the 2030 agenda and the SDGs and the Paris Climate Agreement, we would have been better equipped to face the challenges that are now plaguing the world. If we had stronger health systems, less extreme poverty, if gender inequality was less of a challenge, if our natural environments were in healthier state, we would be more resilient. And we have to bring ourselves to that place so that we never again are met with this kind of a challenge that hobbles the entire global community. So we're working with companies to think through some of those tough issues and to transform the risks that we face now into amazing business opportunities to both halt the pandemic, to mitigate some of the negative impacts, and to think through what does strong and better recovery look like. So we're hosting a weekly Academy series that's open to everyone, where we're talking through some of these issues with key business leaders and leaders from the United Nations. We're profiling good leadership from CEOs who are taking action in their companies to challenge others to follow their examples. And we're also looking forward to a number of virtual convenings in the coming months to celebrate our 20th anniversary and bring business together to think about how we unite for a better world. More specifically, though, on what companies can do in partnership with the UN in response to the pandemic, we put out a business guide on COVID-19 that brings together the various moving pieces of the UN response, the WHO response, the response of our humanitarian agencies, and the vision and the strategy of the Secretary General for our response and recovery, and essentially translating those various plans and strategies into a short, concise overview for business around what they can do. And it covers 4 areas. Of course, financial contributions, as Chrysula very impressively outlined, can go a little bit of funding can go a long way, and we encourage that. And the Solidarity Response Fund is a critical mechanism for contributions. But in-kind support is also really crucial. And I would like to point out the WHO's authoritative list of supplies. It's called the Disease Commodity Package, and it is the Bible for any companies, in particular in the fashion sector, interested in providing in-kind support, that goes over all of the different supplies the technical specifications, and can help you figure out what exactly is needed. Because what's not needed is the dumping of supplies that don't meet technical specifications, that might not be logistically possible for us to receive. So please look to the WHO as a partner to guide you if you are interested. Advocacy is so important. The private sector and established companies are among the most trusted institutions at this challenging time, often more than government or the United Nations or other organizations. So when business speaks, governments listen. And that's an incredibly powerful tool right now. And we encourage the sector to think through joint advocacy, the support for the WHO, encouraging the continued opening of humanitarian supply chains, air corridors. We need to continue to ensure that goods and services are moving so that we can supply areas in most need for the response effort. And then there's commercial activities. And I would encourage folks on the line to think through whether they might be able to repurpose their facilities and respond to some of the different procurement opportunities from a core business perspective, because we know you've got to keep the lights on, you've got to continue paying your workers and finding ways to operate. So think through whether from a commercial perspective, there are ways that you can pivot to help the UN in the response. And turning to sort of recovery, if I have one more minute, Dawda.
30 seconds.
Great. The SDGs should be a lighthouse to us in this COVID storm. And in the rush to return to normal, we need to use this time to think, what are we rushing back to? And to use the SDGs as a tool for making those transformations that we've all been talking about, we've been wanting to see. Let's use this time to really realize that, whether it's on climate, on water, on inequalities. This sector obviously has a lot of leadership that it can show on issues such as decent work. Maybe one final statistic, Bangladesh, obviously important for this sector, 432 ICU beds for a population of 170 million. So let that sink through and think through, what does leadership, responsible business leadership look like to ensure that we never again are in this situation where we lack the resilience to meet this pandemic.
Thanks so much, Angus. We've had a question for you. How do people connect on those weekly series?
Great. Well, we welcome one and all, and on our website, unglobalcompact.org, you can find the registration link, and we encourage you to check that out.
Chrysula, final words?
The chasms of inequality exposed by this virus, we have to end this.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Angus. Thank you so much, Chrysula. I'm going to call on you really, really quickly to give very, very quick websites, links that people can engage on the work that you're doing. So Chrysula, can you give those websites again?
COVID-19responsefund.org. Please join us there if you can give.
Perfect. Angus?
unglobalcompact.org. You can sign up for our series and find the business guide I mentioned.
Perfect. Thanks so much. I'm Dawda Jobarteh. We had on the line Chrysula Winegar and Angus Rennie from UN Foundation as well as UN Global Compact. I am Dawda Jobarteh with the Sustainable Development Goals Strategy Hub at the United Nations. I just want to reflect really, really quickly, 90 seconds. We've covered the health emergency phase. We've touched upon the recovery phase that needs to be integrated really in a reimagination and building back better than where we were a short little while ago. And the SDGs, as Angus rightly said, are the roadmap and the plan. We need to collectively, individually and collectively think back, what is the world that we want to live in? What is the world that we want our kids to live in? And how we go about doing that. With regard to the open brief, I wanted to give you the links very, very quickly. And we're really, really fortunate for our partners, our supporters and collaborators from Talent House. They've given us the amazing platform to be able to project the work out and make sure that everyone everywhere gets it. That link is unitednations.talenthouse.com. That's unitednations.talenthouse.com. And the branding is available at COVID-19logo.org or COVID COVID-19stamps, plural.org. I want to give a really quick message of, the Decade of Action is all over the Fashion Innovation website. The idea behind the Decade of Action was really to propel, to raise the level of ambition, to mobilize everyone everywhere, and to provide solutions around the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. That is ever more present, ever more necessary now than it was a month ago, than it was 4 years ago. Everyone has a role to play, everyone has a responsibility to play, and we ask that everyone come together and really propel both the implementation as well as the principles and the values that are underlined in the Sustainable Development Goals. I want to give a very quick shout out and thank you to my colleague, Lucia Brigham, for encouraging me to do this. And then to thank the Fashion Innovation team, Jordana, Marcelo, Eduardo. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to curate this panel and talk a little bit about what the UN is doing in the response to COVID, as well as thanking everyone that's joined and everyone that's donated either your time, your creativity, funding, or just solidarity. I want to give a big thank you, and thank you.